Can I get this for you?
Good morning. Chase Foster.
Chase
Special
Foster?
Agent of the FBI. It's my partner, Mike Capper. How you doing? We were wondering if,
We have nothing to say.
well, I'm just asking if it's here.
We have nothing to say.
So if we were wanting to see if he's here, we would
You'd have to have a warrant.
we'd need a search warrant.
That's right.
Let's see. So we need to speak with, we got a grand jury subpoena for him.
And I have nothing to say.
Let's see, who else do we have? Oh, hold on. Do you know if, working in Falswood?
I have nothing to say.
Do you know why we're here?
I have nothing to say.
If we tell you, would it do any good?
I have nothing to say.
So as far as you cooperating in any way, even if it does not pertain to war or any war members?
I still have nothing to say.
And so if we were here on an applicant investigation, you would have nothing to say?
That's correct. Nothing to say.
About, say, if it concerned, say, a fugitive investigation or...
I have nothing to say, period.
Okay. About anything?
About anything.
I guess this would be your sign. John?
Yeah.
Okay. Pleasure to meet you guys.
All right.
We have nothing for you.
Have a nice day.
Nothing for you today.
Fine.
Hey fellers, check out this cool shack here. We found this maybe about a month ago when we walked the dogs. We walk our dogs at this greenway here. Just an old shack. And what's awesome about it is they have this awesome front porch here. I actually just ran into some Mormon missionaries before. Pulled in here. They were sitting here relaxing. But look at it. This is overlooking the North Chickamauga Creek, I should say. And a couple of good rocking chairs, so what better place to talk about the value of silence, or what I would call white omerta. The concept of white omerta is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, to be honest. However, this video is going to be rambling. I've got a couple of short stories to tell you, and I've got an article to read later in the video from Dr. William Luther Pierce regarding interrogation from the police. And like I said, this is a very simplistic concept. It's not rocket science by any means. But I feel like it's something that needs to be emphasized greatly in these circles. As I've said before, I feel like unfortunately, there is a lack of criminal knowledge, or I guess for the colloquial term, street smarts in these circles. Of course, you know, white nationalists are usually law-abiding citizens, which can be a good thing, but also at times, I have to admit, I think it can hamper this sort of thing we're in, perhaps. Now, I'm not making this video to encourage anyone to do anything illegal, but as I've said before, I don't disavow violence, never will. Because I do think that sooner or later things will come to push and shove. And consider this to be a guide for in case the worst case scenario happens. And like I said, I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything illegal, of course. But what I will emphasize, this video here, the syndicate, I do think that the future is criminal. And I know that sounds a little outlandish. But let's look at things here. You see, regarding this sort of thing that we're in, the line between what's legal and what is illegal is going to be consistently blurred. It's been blurred for a long time now, and it's only going to get more confusing and more blurry as time progresses, I believe. You see, what could be considered just conventional acts of street activism can be twisted by the authorities to suit their means. This line is it's blurry already, and I think it's going to become even more contorted and distorted. I don't want to get too far off on that tangent. Check out that video if you haven't seen it yet, where I explain myself better. But the concept of white omerta is, we all know, well, if you don't, the Sicilian Mafia had a code of omerta in which that they would never collude with authorities, no matter what. If you were wronged under the code of omerta, you handled it yourself, or you simply bore it. You simply dealt with it. Preferably, you handled it yourself. But you never went to authorities, and you never talked about the life. And I think there needs to be a code in these circles that is congruent to this. You know, because when I got into this a few years ago, I really had no fucking idea that there were as many informants, snitches, glow-ops, federales, you could say. I really had no idea that it was this contentious and perhaps treacherous of a scene that it is. I was really naive, like I said. But one thing that I am not naive about is, I've mentioned often before, used to be a criminal, used to be a drug addict. And I went through a period of time between 2016 to the near the end of 2018 that I call the years of meth. It's a time of personal struggle and hardship, which of course I inflicted all of these things on myself. I have no one to blame. I made my own choices. I'm a man. But I gained a lot of street smarts during those years. And during that time, obviously, there is a lot of snitches and informants and things of that nature, because these sort of activities obviously are highly illegal. But I was naive compared to this side of things, you could say. Had no idea. But there's a quick story I have to tell you. It was back in September of 2018. It was about 6 months before me and Miranda moved down here to southeast Tennessee. About 6 weeks. And on this particular day, I had been out hunting ginseng. Back then I laid block for a living, doing block masonry, sometimes stone masonry, not Freemasonry, but actually out there doing manual labor, building foundations and stuff. It rained that day, so our boss called us that morning, told us we was off work. So I took advantage once the rain eased off around lunchtime that day, went off and did some ginseng hunting. Had a decent day too. I went up on a mountain a couple of hollers over, found a few good ginseng roots. Now let me back up real quick here. I am generally a very easygoing person. Laid back, you could say. There are a few things that really piss me off very quickly. Very few. How I conduct myself online, you know, sometimes you may have someone just trying to start shit with you. I usually just ignore these people because I really don't care, you know. If you don't like me, there's the door. Don't let it hit you in the ass on the way out. I find it pointless to just bicker constantly online, you know. It's different though, you know, if someone just has a legitimate disagreement and all that, I'm willing to discuss that, but a lot of times though, I ain't got time for that fucking shit. Not interested, not in the least. But in real life, one of the things that will flip me like a light switch, that can turn me from laughing and having a jolly old time to being on the verge of becoming extremely confrontational and violent, is when I find someone poking their nose around my business. And to be honest, this sort of thing has served me well on a couple of occasions back in my criminal past. And this story that I'm telling you is just one example. As I'd mentioned, as I'd said, I had been out hunting ginseng. And I walked back to my house. I got back home around 7:30 in the evening. It's in September. Usually gets dark around 8 p.m. then. I walked down the woods, down the trail, back to my house, carrying my bag, my ginseng roots that I'd found, and Miranda was sitting at the house waiting for me. She was inside. And I walk into the house, talk to her. I'm in a pretty good mood, you know, considering that during this time my life was a chaotic wreck, you could say. She was doing her schoolwork. She was about to finish school so she could get the job that she moved down here for. We were just talking. She was looking over things sitting on the couch, and I'm standing there. I went to the bathroom, take a leak real quick. And as I'm walking back through my bedroom into the living room, as I mentioned, it's about dark by now. The fading twilight, you could say. And I see a vehicle. If you look out the two front windows in my living room at the house back home, I seen a vehicle. A Subaru sort of SUV. I don't know what make or model it was, but I know it was a Subaru. I got pretty good eyesight. And you know, about 30 yards outside of the front of our house, there's the road going down the holler. And I seen that it was a dark blue or black SUV, a Subaru, probably a similar make and model to what a Honda CR-V would be. I'm not sure what model that is for a Subaru, but they were creeping down the road really slowly. And I didn't know who this was, you know. And they stop right at the end of my driveway. They just stop in the road. They don't turn in. They stop in the road. And I approach the window to look out at it closer. And I see someone in the passenger side click on a flashlight, and they shine it up the driveway at Miranda's car. I flip out. I holler out the window, "Fuck you, motherfuckers, get down the fucking road, bitch." Except I yelled it very loudly. And they quickly cut the light off and sped down the road. Well, Miranda, it surprised her because she was, like I said, reading and doing some work. She kind of jumped. She's like, "What the hell are you barking at?" I was like, "Some motherfucker shining a light at your car going down the road." They stopped right in front of the driveway. Well, about 30 seconds later, this same vehicle had turned around down the road a little ways, pulls up the driveway, and I had a little wooden baseball bat next to the door, and I stand there at the door and I put my left hand on the bat to see who the fuck this is, because I don't know who it is. I was ready to get going. I knew there were two of them at least. Two men get out of their vehicle and they quickly put on a vest. County Sheriff's Department. I was like, what the fuck? Well, I tell Miranda quickly, I'm like, Miranda, it's the fucking police. And I walk out onto the front porch out into the yard to head them off and see what the fuck they wanted. And they walk up and they're like, is there some sort of domestic dispute here? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? They're like, well, we were just driving by and we heard someone say, fuck you, motherfucker, get down the road, bitch, in a very belligerent tone. And I was like, well, yeah, that was me. I didn't know who you were. And they're like, oh. And Miranda wisely had came out onto the porch by then, and they're like, are you alright, ma'am? And she's like, oh yeah, he was just yelling, didn't know who y'all were, stopping in the driveway like that in the middle of the road. She corroborated my story. Well, I was like, well, why y'all shining a flashlight at my woman's car here? And they were like, oh, we were just checking, seeing who was here. We'll see you later, Mr. Southern. I was like, is that it? See you guys later. Thankfully, they didn't hang around or try to ask anything, but it was in this moment, that I realized that someone I was close to, associated with, had talked about me, you could say, to some authorities, some sort of informant. Now, of course, before this, I was a known entity, I guess you could say, to the local sheriffs. I'd been to jail a handful of times, usually for, thankfully, nothing too serious, usually driving on a suspended license. It's a small miracle that I'm not a felon, to be honest. But in that moment, I realized that somebody had been talking about me. Now these two officers were undercover drug detectives. Not necessarily under, deep cover by any means, but they were driving around in a civilian vehicle. And I had a run-in with these same two detectives about a year earlier, to be exact. And I mentioned that in this story, in this video here. In that time, I had a warrant out for my arrest, and I tricked these two detectives. I apologize, little brother, but this is one time in life where I used your identity. And it worked. Kept me from going to jail that particular day. But these two officers, I believe, were watching me from a distance, you could say. Someone had put them onto me with some of the nefarious things that I was involved with during this time. I don't like police. I don't like lawyers, doctors, journalists, or the police. I definitely dislike lawyers. And you see, in the video clip there at the beginning, after the little musical introduction to this video, that was Tom Metzger. Now, Tom Metzger is a terribly underrated figure, I believe, in American white nationalism. He's not one of the big names, yet he is one of the most intelligent, and his views are perhaps the most congruent with mine. My friend Pat over at Surviving by America did an interview with Metzger probably about a year or so before he passed away. Rest in peace, Tom. And it's an outstanding interview. And I'll put a link to it in the box below. But Metzger, in that clip that I show you at the beginning, there's really only 5 words that you need to know. And that is, I have nothing to say. And we see Tom stonewalling the feds there in that video clip. But yeah, that story that I just told you, that's when I realized for sure that they were watching me for whatever reason. And you know, back during the years of meth, you could call me a thief, criminal. You could call me a piece of shit. You could call me a disgrace to my family, because I have a good family. And I'm sure during those years they were just disappointed and horrified sometimes with the way that I had turned out. But one thing nobody could have ever called me was a fucking snitch. A goddamn snitch. And out of those 4 professions that I just mentioned, honestly, I hate informants worse than anything. Worse than any of them. Thankfully though, at that time I was like, yeah, I'm moving out here I'm getting away from here in about 6 weeks. And I'm eternally grateful to Miranda for staying with me through these years. You know, I tried to lead a double life. For, you know, hiding the things that I was into from my family and her, which, being my significant other, she knew, you know, she knew years before the years of meth that I was into, you know, getting high and things of that nature. And I'm eternally grateful to her for giving me the opportunity to come down here, pull my shit together, and do something worthwhile with my life. But I did learn a lot of valuable lessons during these years. Anyways, on to the next part of the video. Boys, what y'all doing? Loki, Bo. They just like to play fight around. Let me walk up here and I'll have the next part of this video for you. Alright, for the next topic of this video, we're going to talk about the police and authority. Now, in my life, I've known of 2 cops that I thought highly of. One of them was my favorite Little League head coach, and then the other was a boy that I played ball with, grew up with. He became a cop. They both worked over in North Carolina, though, not in the jurisdiction I live in. Boys, tone it down. Sorry about that. Now, these guys, these men are good men, and I like them. But even so, it still does not change my opinion on the police. I do not like the police. I can't help it. I do not like them. I do not trust them. I mean, if you think about it, the police are the first line of defense for this system. Also the first line of offense, I guess you could say too. But they are the first line in this system that we hate. Now, you know, and I don't understand on this side of things about this sort of worship of authority, you could say, amongst the right wing. And I'm talking about the broader right wing. And in this, I'm including the thin blue line conservative types. But I mean, even here in the DR, as Pat calls it, you know, I see people shilling for like Russia and China and stuff, you know, and I think a lot of people on this side labor under this delusion that just because something is authoritarian means it's great automatically. This is folly. It's complete folly. And I don't understand it, you know. And I've thought about it before. What is it about the right wing that seems to worship authority, you could say? Myself, I certainly admire and sort of revere a certain controversial political regime that came up, that rose to power in the 1930s in Western and Central Europe. I do have an admiration for them and and what they did. But, you know, I've also thought about it too, you know. Here in the right wing, we believe in hierarchy for the most part, in a sort of natural order, I guess you could say. But, you know, I think it's a mistake that some of these prominent talking heads on this side make, shilling for these authoritarian foreign governments. Now, don't get me wrong, I have no love for this Western liberal democratic system that we labor under, by no means. But I'm not looking elsewhere for the answers, you know, because I've talked about this at length before. You know, I really don't understand it, you know. The worship of authority for authority's sake, you could say. I don't understand it in the least, and I think it is a mistake. You know, I don't understand why some of these quote-unquote thought leaders, the people that have been foisted before us, self-proclaimed leaders, why they do these sort of things. I don't know if they're perhaps funded by, say, Russia or whatever. But I don't know, you know, I just think it's a folly, to be honest, you know. I don't think it is, I think you're going to be sorely mistaken thinking you're going to receive outside help, to be brutally honest. But that's just my opinion. Now, I'm going to look back at my family here for a little bit. So I've mentioned before, my ancestry is primarily Northern English, Ulster Scot, or Scotch-Irish, and I've got a bit of Danish blood as well. And, you know, I genuinely just have a distrust of all authority, to tell you the truth. Always have. And I guess it's just the Ulster Scot blood that is bringing this about, I guess you could say. That's manifesting this. I've always had a distrust of authority. And, you know, I've heard some people here in these circles, they call the Scotch-Irish who settled Appalachia here, I've heard some people say that they are low-tier whites. Well, my response to these people is that I think they're jealous. I think that you're a pussy, you're a faggot, and yeah, there's a lot that could be learned from the Ulster Scots. What I admire about the Ulster Scots is that they have this sort of clannish structure, and they brought it over here to the United States during the formation of this country. And it can be said, you know, also that the Scandinavians, the Vikings, and the periods before the Viking Age, they also had this clannish structure in their society. And, you know, it does result in a lot of blood feuds. You know, I mean, probably the most popular Appalachian sort of blood feud, I guess you could say, was between the Hatfields and the McCoys. And, I mean, in each little mountain town, there are stories. Even in the town that I'm from, there's a couple of families, notorious families, that used to go at each other decades ago. But anyways, this clannish structure is very important. And I mean, it's you can apply this also, you know, on a broader sense to all of the native European peoples. I mean, you look at the Italians, how, and other Southern Europeans, how the family is it is central to their culture, you could say. And I think this has been eroded some, but it seems like the Scotch-Irish, the Italians, they've preserved it, honestly, the best in this country. And I think that my distrust about regarding authority comes from this, you know. Now, I'm also going to switch gears a second about my family. As far back as I can trace my recent ancestors, the different branches of the family tree, there have been no lawmen or sheriffs in my family. None. In fact, several of them ended up on the other side of what's legal, you could say. They were outlaws, hellraisers. And I'm really proud of that, to be honest. Very proud of it. And I'm going to speak now just a little bit about my father. Now, my dad is one of the most moral and upright men that I know. And I'm not just saying this because he's my father, of course. He is... There's a clique, I guess you could say, of popular guys, older guys that run the town, the village that I'm from. My dad's not a part of this group. My dad is kind of an outsider, you could say. He keeps to himself. You know, he's got some of his friends in the village back home that he talks to or will hang out with some. But he's not a very outgoing person. But he is known as a man of his word. And I've heard a lot of people, older people, tell me this before, that he is a man of his word. You know, my dad has never been to jail. Watch out, Bo. He's never been to jail before. I don't know if he's ever really done anything illegal, but he is a man of his word. You're dirty. You're dirty, Bo. Watch out, dude. You're gonna hit my camera. Watch out. Watch out. There you go. Okay. There you go. Anyways, he is a man of his word. But one thing that he taught me as a kid and growing up, he taught me and my younger brother, is that he does not like the police either. Even though our morality, back when I was into criminality and drugs and all those things, our morality we were polar opposites of each other. But growing up, he taught me not to trust the police, because they will cause problems for you, and you avoid calling them or relying on them at all costs. And I mean, this is coming from a man that really, you know, never done anything illegal. You know, I mean, he's an extremely upright man. He has outstanding morals. You know, given my past, I fail miserably in that regard compared to him. And he taught us, he'd beat our ass if we would like tattletale on each other. Him and Mom, they hated it, you know. And even though, you know, back during the years of meth, we clashed often. And my dad, he could make me so mad sometimes because he knew how to push my buttons. But I mean, he was right. And I think the reason back then that I would get so angry with him sometimes was because deep down, I knew he was right. I knew what I was doing was wrong. Wasn't raised to do those sort of things, but I still did them. Watch out, Bo. You know, so he always taught us, you know, never trust the police. And to always be weary of those who are granted authority over us. To be leery of them, I should say. And I've got one last little story, quick one, that I'm going to tell you. It was back in 2017. Me and a buddy of mine, we were out burning up the roads, up to no good, you could say. And he wanted to go to his cousin's house, to his cousin's trailer. We went there. And I was just, you know, sitting there. He was talking to his cousin, and his cousin, she had a little boy and a little girl. It's probably about 4 One of the little girl was about 4. I'd say the boy was about 6, 5 or 6. And me and my buddy, we both had warrants out for us at this time. Same warrant that I told you about in the criminal story video. Just failure to appear on driving on a suspended license. Really stupid charge to pick up, to be honest. I just didn't like paying tickets and didn't go to court when my court date showed up. So I got a warrant issued. But we had been there for about 10 minutes and the law shows up. We were in the town, the county seat of my county back home. And the law shows up, and we both got warrants. And his cousin's husband told us, he's like, boys, the fucking law's here. So me and him, we went opposite ways in this little single-wide trailer. I went one way, he went the other. He went and hid in their bedroom's closet or something. What I did is I went to the other end of the trailer, to the bathroom. I opened the window, I climbed out of it. And about turned my ankle really good when I hit the ground. And I hobbled real quickly over to the woods. I wasn't going down like that, not that day. Wasn't going down that way. But I hobbled over to the woods. They were only there for about maybe 6 or 7 minutes. And I seen them pull out the driveway and leave whenever, just after a few minutes had passed. So I hobbled back around, come into the front of the trailer. And when I come in there, those 2 little kids were bawling, screaming. Their mother had beat their ass as soon as those cops had left. And I heard them in the back room, and I asked my buddy, I was like, dude, what the hell is she beating them kids? Why is she beating their asses for? And he's like, well, they told on us. They said that there were 2 men here. The law was looking for the law was there looking for someone else that his cousin and her husband knew. But they had covered for us, said that they were the only ones there. But the kids had told the police that there was 2 men, that there was a man that had went that way, pointing where I had went. And she was beating their ass for snitching, you could say. Of course, these are kids, you know. I felt sympathy for these children, to be honest. You know, I mean, they really didn't know any better, of course. But that being said, looking back on it, what my buddy's cousin, what she was doing was teaching a lesson, a pretty harsh lesson, you could say, a very harsh lesson in white OMERTA. In teaching her kids that you don't talk to the police, you don't willingly give up information. Harsh lesson, you know. And I felt kind of guilty for us being there. But I guess she viewed it, my buddy's cousin, she viewed it as a learning experience to terrify her children at the idea of talking to the police. You know, this is some of that Scotch-Irish blood coming out, you could say. This culture of disdain and distrust for authority. And the last point I'm trying to make, the last point I want to make is I want to say that if you ever decide, if you ever get hemmed up, if you ever decide to become an informant, to become a snitch, sooner or later, they're going to feed you to someone who will correct things. I have heard about this happening. Fucking chopper flying overhead. Anyways, they're going to feed you to someone who will correct things. I've heard about this happening in my own personal life. I have heard of snitches ending up in jail. And you know, there's ways that they arrange these things. Jail guards, jailers. I've heard of some about getting beaten to death before in jail or killed. I've heard a couple of stories. I didn't know them, but I've heard of a couple of stories where these snitches, on a long enough timeline, they get fed to someone who will correct things. You shouldn't trust the police if you end up becoming an informant. They're going to fuck you. All you are to them is an information whore. That's all you are. And once you become an informant, once someone allows the authorities to pop their proverbial cherry, you could say, and they turn into a snitch, they always come back to you. And I've got a stream, a bit of a stream that a guy named Jonesy made. I don't know how to get a hold of Jonesy. I hope he doesn't mind, but it's very relevant to the subject of this video, and I'm going to play you a bit of it, have some commentary. You know, you don't trust authorities. You don't talk to the police. You don't try to think that you can gather counterintelligence, that you can play both sides. You are not that fucking smart. You aren't. Do you think that you're going to maintain control of such a situation? And you know, the police, or whoever it is that your handler is, they'll act like your friend. They'll even pay you to be a confidential informant. But sooner or later, they're going to feed you to someone that you fucked over. And I just forgot what I was going to say. I've seen it happen. Don't fucking do it. You should be terrified. And there is a case, and I don't want to reveal too much of this because this is my friend Pat's research that he's done. But there was a murder of a woman named Heather Teague. And this happened in eastern Kentucky on the banks of the Ohio River. Maybe north central Kentucky, somewhere up there. And it's an interesting case because it ties into this huge conspiracy all across this country. I don't want to reveal too much, but there is a lot of evidence that Heather Teague was an informant of some sort, a confidential informant. And she wasn't an ugly girl or anything. She was a decent looking girl. You know, probably in the periphery of criminality, you could say. This is a trick as old as time as itself, using women in sort of what you could call spycraft, espionage. You know, they say prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. Well, using women to gather intelligence or to manipulate, this is a trick just as old as prostitution, you could say. And it's interesting too, because the guy that abducted Heather Teague off the bank, there was a beach on the Ohio River. She had been out there sunbathing. I guess she was the only one around. The only way that this is known is that there was a witness there, but he was across the river with his binoculars. I guess he was probably a peeping Tom looking at Heather. And he seen this guy pull up in a vehicle, grab her by the hair, snatch her up, throw her in the back of his van, and he ended up killing her. And what's interesting too is when the police started to put things together after, I guess, the testimony or the statement that this peeping Tom must have made, when the police showed up at his house, he ends up shooting himself, you know. It's an interesting story, and it's just one of the tips of the iceberg in this grand overarching conspiracy, you could say. But I don't want to delve too far into that. But never trust the police. Never turn into a snitch. Because the police may act like your friend, and they'll pay you, but they respect you even less than the criminals that they are after. They respect you even less. Anyways, now I will read you the article by William Luther Pierce regarding interrogation. So let's get to it. Alright, fellers. This article by Dr. William Luther Pierce is titled Collaborating with the Secret Police. A standard police textbook in a ball and read, Criminal Interrogation and Confessions begins. The interrogation of criminal suspects, witnesses, and prospective informants is the investigative procedure most frequently used by the police. In fact, most of our serious crimes would remain unsolved if it were not for the investigative leads and the proof of guilt that result from criminal interrogations. The first paragraph of the chapter titled The Psychology of Confessions in another standard police textbook, this one called Aubrey and Capuzzo, Criminal Interrogation, contains the sentence, "In every individual there is a powerful need for the acceptance and approval of other human beings." The chapter then explains in detail how this need can be manipulated by an interrogator to obtain desired information from a person being interviewed. The relevance of the foregoing to the average member may seem remote, but unfortunately it is becoming much less so. It would be nice if it could still be assumed, as it might have been a few years ago, that an agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the Secret Service, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or any other federal police agency, is a person with whom every decent citizen ought to cooperate. Today, however, every racially conscious white person is obliged to regard the government of the United States as the most dangerous enemy of his race, and every willing agent of that government as unredeemable and malevolent race traitors. More and more in coming years, the principal task of the federal government's various secret police agencies will be the suppression of all opposition to governmental policies intended to destroy white consciousness, white values, and eventually white genes. Whether the opposition is violent and illegal, as in the case of the Aryan resistant movement, or merely involves the dissemination of ideas, the government's police agents will be involved in gathering information about it and then taking whatever measures to halt its current laws that current laws will permit them to take. It becomes the duty of every alliance member to avoid collaborating in any way with them. One way in which some alliance members have collaborated with them in the past is simply by talking with them. When a government police agent identifies himself to the average citizen and begins asking questions, the almost irresistible urge is to answer the questions. Regardless of the difficulty, this urge must be resisted. The difficulty comes from the human trait noted in every textbook on interrogation technique of needing approval and acceptance. The average person, when approached by a government police agent, is intimidated and awed. He tries to ingratiate himself to convince the agent that he has nothing to hide and wants to be helpful. This is an essentially feminine reaction. But in today's degenerate society, it is the reaction to be expected from most men as well as from women. People who have collaborated with government police agents try to justify their behavior in various ways. One of the most common justifications is, "I didn't tell them anything really important. I just told them what they already knew anyway." There are two lethal flaws in this justification. First, even seemingly trivial, non-incriminating information may be important. The secret police are skilled at piecing together such information from many sources to develop their leads. The only way to avoid them in their dirty work is to tell them nothing. Second, it is very often the case that the secret police know something, but cannot prove it in court, because all they have is inadmissible hearsay evidence. They need witnesses. If in questioning someone, they discover that he also knows it, then he may be compelled to become a witness and testify in court to what he knows under the threat of being jailed for contempt of court if he refuses. In court, of course, A witness may invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, but only to protect himself and not someone else. And if the court grants him immunity from prosecution, then he must choose between incriminating someone else by his testimony, committing perjury, and also risking a long prison sentence for it, or being jailed for refusing to testify. It is infinitely better not to be called as a witness, which means not letting the secret police know that you know something in the first place. But what will I tell them if they ask me whether or not I ever met so-and-so? It will be easy for them to find out from others that I met him. I have to tell them something. Wrong. No one has to tell them anything. A person who has not been summoned into court and put under oath is under absolutely no legal obligation to answer any question asked by the police or to help them in any other way. And he is under a strong moral obligation not to help them. But he must not deliberately hinder them by lying to them, because that is illegal. Furthermore, the average white person is a very poor liar, and he can often be tripped up in his own lies by a skilled interrogator. If the interrogator catches him in a lie, then the government can threaten him with prosecution for obstructing justice, even if he has committed no other illegal act, unless he becomes an informer. It may seem a trivial point, but it is worth repeating. The only proper policy for a racially conscious white person to follow when approached by a government police agent is to say, "I have nothing to say to you." If the agent responds, "Why not?" the answer should be the same, "I have nothing to say to you." It is very, very difficult for some people to understand such a simple thing, but everyone who expects to participate in the struggle for a white future must understand it. He must convince himself that there is nothing whatsoever to be gained by ingratiating himself with the secret police. A good secret police agent will put handcuffs on his own mother if he has an arrest warrant for her, no matter what she may say in an attempt to dissuade him, and he cannot arrest someone for whom he has no warrant, no matter how much he may hate the person's guts. By answering a secret policeman's questions, a person can only make things worse for himself, whether he has committed an illegal act or not. There is nothing he can say which will make things better for him. So, once again, if approached by a government police agent, don't be rude or insulting, don't lie, and don't answer any questions. No matter how seemingly inconsequential, just say, "I have nothing to say to you," and say nothing else, no matter how persistent that agent is. Alright guys, now that I've read the article, I have a homework assignment, you could say, for you guys. I know earlier I mentioned a stream by a guy named Jonesy. I was thinking about, going through it and breaking it down, but for the sake of brevity, I'll leave that up to you. If you've already seen it, then you're ahead of the curve. But if you haven't, I highly recommend you watch this stream. Jonesy and his friend Vic, they basically dissect the meltdown of a federal agent. Well, informant, fed. There's a difference between informants and actual agents, of course. Informants are usually a lot more stupid. But really, for the sake of brevity, they're still both parts of the system, unfortunately. But you need to listen to this. It's only about 34 or 35 minutes long. Jonesy puts on a very good show. It's quite comical. But it's about a guy named Pino Capuzzo, who was a content creator a few years ago, I reckon. It was kind of before my time, I guess you could say, but there is timeless lessons in this stream, and Jonesy and Vic did an outstanding job. I'll put a link to it in the box below, but if for some reason the link doesn't work, in the search bar type Jonesy, They Called My Mommy, Agent Pino Capuzzo. That's the title of the stream. It's well worth checking out. Now, just some closing remarks here. You know, I see this a lot in these circles, especially nowadays. Maybe it's always been this way, I do not know. But you know, I see a lot of people saying, oh, so-and-so's a Fed, this person's a Fed, that person's a Fed, this, that, you know, and it's oftentimes it's completely without proof, you know. And that's something that I have to say I've never done, is call people Feds, you know, or informants or whatever. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't fucking know. Now, don't get me wrong. I do have suspicions about people, some of the prominent names. However, I don't air them out in public. And I don't have any proof, you know. But, like I said, suspicions. And, you know, suspicions alone are not, really not evidence, you could say. I refrain from it, you know, and I mean, I've been called a Fed a couple of times, because I face fag, you know, I show my face. And that is a tendency, you know, that is a tendency that some of these bad actors will employ, face fagging. And, you know, 3 years ago when I started this channel, I was really naive. Like I mentioned earlier, I was extremely naive. And you know, I would never encourage anyone to face fag, to dox themselves. You know, this is a persistent question, it seems like, in these circles. And for the life of me, I do not understand it, you know. There is power in anonymity. Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of these popular guys that are encouraging, you know, debating this, doxing your, whether or not to dox yourself, you know, they have a fucking fallback, you know. They're able to make money off of whatever it is that they produce or do or whatever. And normal guys like us, we don't have no safety net like that, you know. We don't. It's unfortunate. It'd be nice if there was such a thing. But doesn't seem to be the case, you know. I'd never encourage anyone to dox themselves. I mean, I've heard some people say, oh, take power. Yeah, take power of what? Lose your fucking livelihood? Perhaps your family, this or that, you know? I mean, we all should, you know, for any cause, there is sacrifices that have to be made, but for something senseless, you know, I'd never encourage anyone to do it, you know. Absolutely not. Be safe with your information. Absolutely. You know, I'm pretty open about things. I don't have anything to hide, but still, you know, like I said, when I got into this, I was really naive. And some of the content creators that I looked up to the most, you know, like Varg or Vegard Solheim or Apollonian German Didymus, you know, that's who I took my cue from, I guess you could say. Like I said, I was naive, but anyways, don't call people Feds without proof. You can have your suspicions and you can air them out all you want. You know, it's good to let people know. And I mean, that Pino Capuzzo guy, he's allegedly still around on Telegram. You know, these people, these fucking informants and whatnot, they never go away until, well, you know, they're gotten rid of, basically. They never go away. It's like I said earlier, once the authorities pop your proverbial cherry, you are nothing more than a tool and an information whore, selling yourself to the highest bidder for about, I don't know, maybe $900 to $1,100 a month. I mean, you are a race traitor. You are, you know, we can blame a lot of different groups or ethnic groups, but over time I've came to see it that I hate informants the most. Because they are the absolute scum of the earth. I don't care if they're white, Native European, whatever. They are scum. And they are dead men walking. Given some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, you know. I don't understand why people trust authority. The authorities, you know. And another point that I wanted to make. You know, some people have thought that it is smart to use the authorities against your enemies. Perhaps, you know, reporting on Antifa or some of these leftist groups to the authorities. Don't do it. Don't fucking do it. It's like I said earlier, you don't talk to these motherfuckers. I don't care how smart you think you are. You will not remain in control of this situation. It's not going to go how you planned it. The authorities are much more well funded. They have a million times more resources. They have so many more ears and eyes, and you know, I mean, I'm not trying to stoke paranoia or anything, but do not talk to these motherfuckers about anything. Not even if you're reporting on your enemy. I wouldn't fucking do it, because every time you talk to them, they are gathering intelligence about you. Even though the subject may be about whatever this group or that group's doing, you can bet your bottom dollar they are watching you and they are learning about you. You know, it's the value of fucking silence, the value of secrecy, you know. Something that I think our side don't fully comprehend, unfortunately. You know, and about doxing and stuff too, you know. Doxing is a really effeminate behavior, I believe. Very feminine. I mean, so many aspects of fucking modern society is so effeminate that it nauseates me. You know, and I know that is the primary weapon, the primary tactic that some of these groups use. And, you know, I mean, I'm not opposed, per se, to the idea of doxing these other people, but, you know, it leaves a lot to be said, you know, that we live in such an effeminate society that people will put whoever's information out there and hope someone goes and does something, you could say. It's just really effeminate, leaving it up to someone else, you know, which I guess part of it too is to force someone to lose their job or livelihood. You know, it's just, I hate it, but that is a sign of the fucking times. It's just how it is. So, you know, guard yourself, guard your information. And in this video here, well over a year ago, I read an essay by a guy named Bill White, who was an activist of sorts in these circles years ago. And he wrote a brilliant essay, it's not all that long, about how informants operate. If you want to watch that video, right here it is. It's an hour-long video. The second half is where I read the essay. So go 30 minutes in. You know, you need to be aware of these things. You know, and is there anything else? You know, like I said earlier, the lines between what is legal and illegal are blurry, and they're going to continue to be blurry, even more blurred, distorted, and contorted. You know, I mean, just a few months ago, you know, Patriot Front, they were arrested for protesting Drag Queen Story Hour up there in Idaho. Idaho's normally what you would think is a conservative area, you could say. They were arrested, you know, and I mean, it's pretty clear, pretty obvious that there has been informants in that group. You know, and that's another thing. I'm weary of any sort of large gathering of so-called white nationalists. Any large gathering, because odds are very high that there's going to be some informants in there, some snitches. You know, it's just, in that essay that I mentioned a second ago by Bill White, you know, he theorizes that at least that about 1 in every 200 Americans is an informant of some type. That is 0.5% of the population. Now this is the whole broad, you know, everything, all aspects of all the different facets of criminality, but also in, you know, political movements. And this, what we are involved in, is such a hot button topic. You know, the authorities, I mean, we see it in the media every day. You know, white supremacist terrorism, you know, that's the greatest threat to our democracy. And, you know, there is a lot of incentive for the secret police agencies, as Pierce called them, to get this thing going, you know, to create something, to fabricate something, or to, I mean, it's obvious, you know. And also, too, you know, be careful who you associate with. You know, unfortunately, due to the advent of, you know, social media and this movement, it seems like, you know, people just want to let everybody in. You need to be reserved about who you let close to you. And, you know, if you get a bad feeling about someone, cut it off. Break it off, you know. Listen to your gut, your intuition. It's served me well before. You know, looking back at my past, not every time was I correct about something, but I would say between 8 and 9 out of 10 times, your gut's right. You know, and you can sharpen, I believe you can sharpen your intuition, you know, just, I guess through life experience, you could say. You know, it's just an intangible asset to have. It's a very valuable one. And I mean, I've been lucky so far. I've been really lucky to fall in with a good group of guys. Guys like Pat, Desiree, Martin, Ricky, everybody in our little group there. Apollonian German, Didymus, and Yonder, Boss Chad, all these guys, you know. I could spend the next 5 minutes naming off names, you know. I appreciate you all. I think I've been lucky so far. I've only came into contact with 1 or 2 people online that have kind of spooked me, you know. And whenever that happens, you know, I just cut off contact. I don't want nothing to do, you know. If my gut, and you know, I'm not a paranoid person by nature, but if, you know, I believe what I see, you could say. If I see signs that something's right, then something's off, something is not right, I heed them. I listen to them. It's not, you know, I might be wrong sometimes, but still, nevertheless, your intuition is a good thing to have and to heed. And lastly, you know, I tell you these stories not to, you know, brag or anything like that, like I'm some sort of hard ass or anything, because I mean, I don't see myself as that in the least. But what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to give you guys who may not have had a sordid past like me, I'm trying to give you all some encouragement, as in not talking to the authorities under any circumstances, wide omerta, and the consequences that come if you break it, if you open yourself up to this sort of thing. You know, I'm trying to give you all I'm trying to impart some of my knowledge to you, some of my experience and knowledge. You know, it's like Pat has said before, being in this thing's kind of like being on a street corner, you could say. Being out on a street. And I'm trying to give you all some of this knowledge without you having to get involved in any sort of criminality, you could say. Because, as I've said before, I think a sort of criminal knowledge is sorely lacking on this side of things. But anyways, I believe that's it. I want to thank y'all for watching, and check out Jonesy's stream about Pino Capuzzo. Also, check out all the links, the relevant links to my friends' channels and other stuff that I mentioned. And keep your head on a swivel, you know. Be smart. And have the resolve, you know. There is nothing wrong with someone knowing their limit, alright? Don't let people manipulate you. And look out for yourself, you know. And if you've got a friend that looks out for you as well, return the favor. Because that is a very rare, very special thing. Look out for each other. But at the end of the day, you do have to look out for number one. And I'm just trying to give you I can't give you resolve. I can't give you backbone. But I can just give you some knowledge, you know. I can give you some knowledge that will perhaps help you. And there is nothing wrong, like I just stated a second ago. There's nothing wrong, you know. Don't ever go through with anything, unless you are willing and you accept that things could go awry and go to whatever depths it may take. There's nothing wrong with refraining, you know. Don't let people manipulate you. You know, I mean, even about activism, you know. That will be construed in the future, you know, and I mean, I don't have a lot of optimism about conventional activism anymore, other than perhaps charitable work. But I mean, it's going to keep happening. I suppose there is a need for it. But I still think, you know, the cold revolution, as I call it, you know, just trying to wean yourself, trying to become as self-reliant from the system as you possibly can, having a family, having children. This is the greatest form of activism that I think there is, to be honest. It may not be flashy like all these marches and speeches and whatnot, but it's something of substance that isn't celebrated enough, I don't believe. But, you know, I think that's about all. Whenever you're confronted with the authorities, you just have to do like Tom Metzger said, I have nothing to say. And I mean, I've been questioned a couple of times before in my life. I've had the heat on me a couple of times. You know, if you have an accomplice with you, they'll question you independently, each of you alone, and they'll try to scare you. You know, cops will, they play mind games, you know. You've just got to make yourself impervious to them. And you can do that by simply just remembering the 5 words. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. It's served me well in the past. You just got to have some backbone, some conviction, some spine, and some resolve. It's what you got to have. Anyways, I know this has been it's really just a simple subject, and I've went off on a lot of different tangents, but I'm trying to, you know, just give as comprehensive of a list of my thoughts, I guess you could say. Remember the 5 words. Look out for yourself. If you've got trusted friends, look out for them. Thank y'all for watching. Bye-bye.